My wife weaponized 911 to win budget fights until I exposed her false report scheme with hidden cameras, ended our marriage, and reclaimed my life now. Police on you over a budget discussion? Let me tell you exactly how my wife weaponized law enforcement to win arguments, and how the police ended up calling her instead. It started small, like most toxic patterns do. We'd be having a normal conversation about our finances. Maybe I'd question why she spent $300 on clothes without mentioning it. And suddenly, the temperature in the room would drop. "Keep raising your voice and I'll call the cops," she'd say, even though I was speaking in the same calm tone I always used. The first time she said it, I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. Who threatens to call police over a discussion about credit card statements? But when I saw her face, dead serious, staring at me like I was some kind of criminal, the laughter died in my throat. "You're kidding, right?" I asked. "I have every right to feel safe in my own home," she replied, crossing her arms. "And if you're going to be aggressive about money, maybe I need protection." Aggressive? That was her favorite word. Anytime I questioned her spending, anytime I brought up our budget, anytime I asked for basic financial accountability in our marriage, I was being aggressive. But here's the thing that really got to me. She wasn't scared. There was no fear in her eyes, no trembling in her voice. This wasn't a woman who felt threatened. This was a woman who had found a nuclear option for any conversation she didn't want to have. The second time it happened, we were discussing why she'd booked a weekend spa trip without checking our account balance first. When I pointed out we didn't have the money for luxury treatments, she escalated immediately. "You're making me feel unsafe with this interrogation," she said, pulling out her phone. "Maybe I should call someone who can help me feel secure." "An interrogation?" I kept my voice level. "I asked you one question about a charge on our joint account. Your tone is threatening. I might need to call for help." And there it was again, the nuclear option. Disagree with her financial decisions, and suddenly you're a threat that requires police intervention. I started walking on eggshells around money topics, not because I was wrong to question irresponsible spending, but because she'd turned every financial conversation into a potential criminal matter in her mind, or at least that's what she wanted me to believe. By the second month, the threats became more casual, more frequent, discussing the electric bill that had doubled. "Don't make me call 911, asking why she'd signed up for 3 new subscription services. I feel like I need protection right now." She developed a whole vocabulary around it. "I'm feeling unsafe. Your energy is aggressive. I might need to call for help." Always vague enough to maintain plausible deniability. Always specific enough to shut down any conversation she didn't want to have. The worst part wasn't even the threats themselves. It was watching her face when she made them. There was this little smile, this tiny gleam of satisfaction, like she'd just played a winning card in a game I didn't even know we were playing. One evening, after she'd threatened to call police because I'd questioned a $200 charge at a home goods store, I sat her down for a serious conversation. "These threats have to stop," I said. "Normal couples discuss finances without involving law enforcement. Normal husbands don't intimidate their wives over spending," she shot back. "I've never intimidated you. I've asked reasonable questions about our shared money." She leaned back, arms crossed, with that familiar look of someone about to deploy their secret weapon. "That's your opinion. The police might see it differently." And there it was. Not just a threat this time, but a promise. She wasn't just saying she might call them. She was telling me that when she did call them, she had a story ready to go. That night, lying in bed, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't making these threats because she felt scared or unsafe. She was making them because they worked. Every time she pulled out that phone, I backed down. Every time she mentioned calling 911, I dropped the subject and walked away. I trained myself to avoid topics that might trigger her nuclear option. And she learned that the mere threat of police involvement gave her complete control over any conversation in our house. But what really kept me awake that night was a deeper realization. If she was willing to threaten false police reports to win arguments about spending, what would she actually do if we ever had a real disagreement about something that mattered? I was about to find out. The third month brought a whole new level of psychological warfare. The casual threats weren't enough anymore. She'd gotten bored with the basic "I'll call the cops" routine and decided to upgrade her manipulation tactics. It started during a conversation about our joint savings account. She'd withdrawn $800 without discussing it. And when our mortgage payment bounced, I had to ask the obvious question. "Where did that money go?" I asked, showing her the bank statement. Instead of answering, she tilted her head with this calculating look I was starting to recognize. "You know what I'll tell them when they ask why I called?" she said, completely ignoring my question. "Tell who?" "The police. When they asked me why I felt threatened enough to dial 911, she paused, letting that sink in. "I'll tell them you were yelling at me about money, getting in my personal space, making me feel cornered." I stared at her. We were sitting at our kitchen table, 3 feet apart, both of us speaking in normal voices. "I'm not yelling. I'm not in your space." I asked one question about our missing money. "That's not how I experienced it," she said with a shrug. "And the police will believe me over you. They always side with the woman in domestic situations." There it was. Not just a threat to call them, but a detailed plan for what she'd say when she did. She'd thought this through, crafted a narrative, prepared her story. "You're talking about filing a false police report," I said carefully. "False, according to who? You?" She laughed. "It's my word against yours, and I'm the one who feels threatened. That's all that matters." The next week, she took it even further. We were discussing why she bought a new laptop without mentioning it, and when I pointed out we'd agreed to discuss purchases over $200, she went nuclear. "Keep pushing me and you'll find out how fast they respond to domestic disturbance calls in this neighborhood," she said. "This is insane. We're talking about a laptop purchase. We're talking about you trying to control my spending through intimidation." She pulled out her phone and held it up. "One phone call and you're in handcuffs. Do you really want to test that?" But the threat that really got to me came 2 weeks later. She'd signed us up for some expensive home security system without consulting me. And when I said we couldn't afford the monthly payments, she dropped the biggest bomb yet. "I have witnesses," she said casually, like she was mentioning the weather. "Witnesses to what?" "To you being aggressive with me about money. My sister heard you raising your voice last month when she was here. My mom saw how you made me uncomfortable when we discussed the credit card bill at dinner." I remembered both those conversations, normal discussions about normal household finances. Her sister had been in the next room watching TV. Her mom had been helping with dishes when we briefly talked about a payment date at dinner. "You're going to lie to police and use your family as fake witnesses?" "I'm going to tell them how you make me feel when you interrogate me about spending. And yes, they witnessed your aggressive behavior toward me." "This is sick," I told her. "You're talking about destroying my life over budget discussions." "I'm talking about protecting myself from financial abuse," she replied smoothly. "And if you don't like it, try being less controlling about money." That night, I did something I'd never done before. I started recording our conversations about finances on my phone, not because I wanted to spy on my wife, but because I realized she was building a narrative that could land me in jail. The next time she threatened to call police, I was ready. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Make the call." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "You think I won't?" "I think you should do whatever you feel you need to do," I replied. "But understand that making false statements to emergency services is a crime. And I have evidence of what really happened in all these conversations." For the first time in months, she looked uncertain. "You're recording me?" "I'm protecting myself from false accusations." She put her phone down, but the look in her eyes told me this wasn't over. I had just escalated our little game, and she didn't like having her bluff called. "You won't always have your little recorder running," she said quietly. "Are you threatening to lie to police when I'm not prepared to defend myself?" "I'm just saying that one day you'll push too far, and there won't be any evidence to save you." That's when I knew we'd reached the point of no return. The moment that changed everything happened on a Wednesday evening in April. I came home from work to find a shopping bag on our kitchen counter with a receipt sticking out, $537 at some boutique downtown. We'd had this exact conversation a dozen times before, but this time felt different. Maybe because our credit card was already maxed out. Maybe because we had $17 in our checking account. Or maybe because I was just tired of being threatened every time I asked basic questions about our finances. "Can we talk about this purchase?" I asked, holding up the receipt. She was sitting on our couch scrolling through her phone and didn't even look up. "What about it?" "We don't have $500 to spend on clothes right now. I needed new outfits for work." Still not looking at me. "We talked about this. Major purchases get discussed first." That's when she finally put her phone down and gave me her full attention. The same calculating look I'd learned to dread. "Are you trying to control what I wear now?" "I'm trying to have a conversation about money we don't have." She stood up slowly, deliberately, like she was preparing for something. Your tone is getting aggressive. My tone is normal. We're talking about our budget. You're raising your voice. I wasn't. I was sitting in our armchair speaking in the same calm voice I'd used for months whenever we discussed finances. But I could see where this was heading. I'm not raising my voice. I'm asking about a $500 charge when we have no money. You're making me uncomfortable. She took a step back like she was afraid of me. The way you're questioning me feels threatening. Here we go, I thought. The same script she'd been perfecting for months. I'm sitting down asking about our shared finances. Nothing about this is threatening. That's not how I'm experiencing it. She moved toward the kitchen, putting distance between us. You're being intimidating about money again. Again? When was I intimidating before? Every time you interrogate me about spending, every time you make me justify my purchases, it's financial abuse. Financial abuse, that was a new one. Asking about charges on our joint account was now abuse. Discussing our budget isn't abuse, it's marriage. Not when you do it like this. Her voice started getting higher, more dramatic. Not when you corner me and demand explanations like I'm some kind of criminal. I looked around our living room. I was sitting in a chair 8 feet away from her. She was free to walk in any direction she wanted. Nobody was cornered. I asked one question about one purchase. You're scaring me right now. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was afraid of me. The way you're looking at me, the way you're talking to me. I'm looking at you normally, and talking to you like I always do. No, this is different. You're being aggressive and I feel unsafe. And there it was. The magic words that had shut down every financial conversation for the past 4 months. But this time, I didn't back down. I'm not being aggressive. I'm asking about money we spent that we don't have. You need to stop. She pulled out her phone. I'm feeling threatened, and I need this to stop right now. What are you going to do? Call the police because I asked about a credit card charge? She looked at me with this strange mixture of triumph and rage. If that's what it takes to feel safe in my own home. Safe from what? A budget conversation. Safe from your aggressive behavior about money. She started dialing. Actually dialing. For months, she'd threatened to call police, but she'd never gone through with it. This time was different. You're really going to do this? I said, more to myself than to her. I warned you, she replied, pressing the phone to her ear. I told you what would happen if you kept pushing me. I sat there in complete silence, knowing that anything I said could be twisted. Any movement could be called threatening. Any response could be used as evidence against me. But I wasn't worried. Not anymore. Because for the past 2 months, ever since she'd started making detailed threats about false reports and fake witnesses, I'd had security cameras installed throughout our house. Cameras she didn't know about. Cameras that had recorded every conversation, every threat, every moment of this entire exchange. As she spoke to the 911 operator, I realized she had no idea that everything she was about to say would be compared to video evidence of what actually happened. 911, what's your emergency? I could hear the operator's voice through her phone. This was it. The moment she'd been building toward for months. The nuclear option she'd been threatening to use. And, thanks to those cameras, it was about to blow up in her face instead of mine. I watched my wife transform into someone I didn't recognize as she spoke to the 911 operator. The woman who'd been calmly shopping for $500 outfits an hour earlier was now trembling, her voice shaking with manufactured fear. My husband is being aggressive, and I feel unsafe, she said into the phone, glancing at me to make sure I was listening. He's been yelling at me about money, and I think he might hurt me. Yelling. I'd been sitting in the same chair, speaking in the same calm tone for the entire conversation. But according to her version, I was some kind of raging maniac. Please, send someone, she continued, her voice getting more dramatic by the second. He's standing over me in a threatening way, and I'm scared of what he might do. Standing over her? I looked down at myself, still seated in my armchair, hands folded in my lap. She was painting a picture of physical intimidation that had absolutely no connection to reality. What's your address? The operator asked. She gave our address, then added, Please hurry. He's getting more agitated, and I don't feel safe. Agitated? I hadn't moved or spoken since she'd started dialing. But in her narrative, my silence was somehow evidence of escalating violence. Ma'am, are you in immediate physical danger? The operator asked. This was the moment. This was where she'd either tell the truth or commit a felony by lying to emergency services. I think so, she whispered like she was afraid I might hear her. The way he's looking at me right now, the way he cornered me about spending money. I've never seen him like this before. There it was. A complete fabrication delivered to a 911 operator with the skill of someone who'd been rehearsing this performance for months. Is he armed? Has he threatened you with violence? No weapons, but he doesn't need one. He's much bigger than me, and he's been getting more and more aggressive about controlling my spending. I'm afraid he's going to snap. Controlling her spending. She'd managed to turn asking about our budget into financial abuse that might escalate to violence. It was almost impressive how smoothly she wove the lies together. Officers are on their way, ma'am. Stay on the line with me. Thank you, she said. Then she looked directly at me. They're coming. Maybe now you'll understand that I'm serious about feeling unsafe. I said nothing. Every instinct told me to defend myself, to point out the obvious lies, to explain what had really happened, but I knew that anything I said would just give her more ammunition. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my brother, police coming to house. Wife called them over budget discussion. Have security cameras, we'll call you later. She saw me texting and her eyes narrowed. Who are you texting? She demanded. I didn't answer. Are you trying to get someone to back up your story? She asked the 911 operator. He's texting people right now, probably trying to coordinate lies about what happened. Even my attempt to notify family was being twisted into evidence of guilt. 15 minutes later, I heard car doors slamming outside. 2 patrol cars had arrived, which meant at least 4 officers were about to walk into our house, expecting to find a domestic violence situation. They're here, she told the operator, then hung up. Before opening the door, she messed up her hair slightly and wiped her eyes to make them look red. The preparation was chilling to watch. The first officer was a tall man in his 40s with graying temples. His partner was a younger woman who immediately focused on my wife's distressed appearance. Ma'am, are you hurt? The female officer asked. Not physically, my wife replied, her voice still shaking. But I've never been so scared in my own home. Sir, I need you to step outside with me, the male officer said to me. Of course, I replied calmly. As we walked onto the front porch, I could hear my wife talking to the female officer inside. He's been getting more and more controlling about money, she was saying. Tonight, he cornered me about a purchase and started yelling, demanding explanations like I was some kind of criminal. The officer with me was professional but watchful. Can you tell me what happened tonight? He asked. We were discussing our budget. I asked about a $500 charge when we don't have money in our account. She escalated it into this. Did you raise your voice? Make any threatening gestures? No, sir. I was sitting in a chair the entire time, speaking normally. Through the window, I could see my wife gesturing dramatically as she told her version to the other officer. She says you were standing over her in a threatening manner. Officer, I'd like to show you something that might clear this up. What's that? We have security cameras in our living room. Everything that happened tonight is recorded. His eyebrows went up slightly. You have video of this incident? Every word, every movement, from multiple angles. From inside the house, I heard my wife's voice getting louder as she continued her performance for the female officer. I don't know why he's gotten so violent about money lately. I'm starting to think he might have some kind of mental health issue. Mental health issue. She was really going all out. The male officer looked at me with new interest. Sir, if you have video evidence of what actually happened, I'd very much like to see it. Absolutely, I said. I think it will answer all your questions. What my wife didn't know was that those cameras had been recording her threats to make false police reports for weeks. She thought she was finally getting her revenge. Instead, she was about to hand the police a complete record of her own crimes. The moment we walked back into the house, I could see my wife's confidence starting to crack. She'd been in full performance mode with the female officer, but when she saw me returning with her partner, something shifted in her expression. Ma'am, your husband mentioned you have security cameras, the female officer said. We'd like to review the footage of tonight's incident. The color drained from my wife's face. Cameras? She stammered. What cameras? The security system we installed 2 months ago, I said calmly. Multiple cameras throughout the house, including the living room where our conversation took place. We never discussed installing cameras, she said quickly, looking between the officers. You were at your sister's place when the technicians came, I replied. I mentioned it in a text, but you said you were too busy to discuss home security details. That was true. She'd been so focused on planning her eventual false police report that she'd ignored my text about upgrading our security system. "Sir, can you show us this footage?" the male officer asked. "Absolutely." I led them to our home office where the security monitor was located. My wife followed reluctantly, her earlier dramatics completely abandoned. "The cameras store everything in high definition with audio," I explained, pulling up the system interface. "This is tonight's recording from our living room starting about 20 minutes ago." I pressed play, and there we were on the screen, me sitting calmly in my chair, her standing by the couch with her phone. "Can we talk about this purchase?" my recorded voice said, holding up the receipt. The officers watched intently as the scene unfolded exactly as I described. My wife sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone, me asking reasonable questions about our budget, her escalating the situation step by step. "Your tone is getting aggressive," her recorded voice said, even though the video clearly showed me speaking in a normal, calm manner. "Ma'am," the female officer said, glancing at my wife, "your husband's tone sounds quite normal to me." We continued watching. The camera captured everything, me remaining seated the entire time, speaking in the same level voice while she moved around the room, creating the illusion of being cornered or threatened. "You're scaring me right now," her voice said on the recording, while the video showed her standing freely in the middle of our kitchen with multiple exit routes available. "She's not exhibiting any signs of actual fear," the male officer observed. "Her body language doesn't match her words at all." The most damning part came when we reached her 911 call. The officers listened as she told the operator I was standing over her in a threatening way, while the video clearly showed me sitting motionless in my chair 8 feet away. "I think he might hurt me," her recorded voice said to the operator. While on screen, she was looking directly at me with what could only be described as satisfaction. "Ma'am," the female officer said, her tone noticeably cooler now, "this footage shows something very different from what you reported to our dispatcher." "I was scared," my wife protested weakly. "Just because I wasn't showing it doesn't mean I wasn't feeling it." "You told our operator he was standing over you," the male officer said. "The video shows him seated in a chair the entire time. You said he was yelling." "The audio proves he never raised his voice. But I felt threatened," she insisted. "Feelings don't justify false statements to emergency services," the female officer replied sharply. I fast-forwarded to show them something else I'd been saving. "Officers, there's more you should see. This is from last week." The new footage showed my wife making threats about calling police during a conversation about our credit card bill. "One phone call and you're in handcuffs," her recorded voice said. "I have witnesses who will say you were aggressive with me." "And this is from 3 weeks ago," I continued, showing another clip. "The police will believe me over you," she said on screen. "It's my word against yours, and I'm the one who feels threatened." The officers exchanged glances. "Ma'am, this footage shows a pattern of you threatening to make false police reports," the male officer said. "Those weren't threats," she said desperately. "I was just expressing how his behavior made me feel." "You explicitly stated you would lie to police about what happened," the female officer said. "That's not expressing feelings. That's planning to file false reports." "This is ridiculous," my wife snapped, her mask completely off now. "You're supposed to be helping me, not interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal." "Ma'am, making false reports to emergency services is a crime," the male officer said. "We take false 911 calls very seriously, especially when they involve allegations of domestic violence." "But I'm his wife," she protested. "That doesn't give you the right to waste police resources or make false accusations," the female officer replied. The male officer turned to me. "Sir, this video evidence clearly shows that no domestic violence occurred tonight. In fact, it shows your wife made knowingly false statements to our emergency dispatcher." "Thank you, officer. We apologize for the confusion, but we have to follow up on all domestic violence calls. I understand completely." The female officer was writing something in her notebook. "Ma'am, you'll be receiving a citation for filing a false police report. This is a misdemeanor charge that requires a court appearance." "A citation?" My wife's voice was shrill now. "You can't be serious." "We're very serious," the male officer said. "False emergency reports endanger real victims who need help and waste taxpayer resources." "But I'm the victim here," she protested. "The only victim here," the female officer said, "is the emergency response system you abused tonight." As the officers prepared to leave, they handed my wife a citation with a court date and fine amount that made her face go pale. $1,500, she read aloud. Plus court costs, the male officer added. And this will go on your permanent record. After they left, my wife stood in our living room holding the citation, staring at it like she couldn't believe what had just happened. I can't believe you let them give me a ticket, she said. I didn't let them do anything, I replied. You earned that citation by committing a crime on camera. But I'm your wife. You were my wife. Now you're someone who makes false police reports to win arguments. The cameras had saved me from her lies. But more than that, they'd exposed exactly who I'd been living with for the past 4 months. Someone who was willing to destroy my life over a budget conversation. The next morning, she tried to pretend nothing had happened. Made coffee like usual, asked what I wanted for breakfast, acted like she hadn't committed a felony on camera 12 hours earlier. We need to talk about last night, I said, setting down my coffee cup. What about it? She replied, not meeting my eyes. You filed a false police report. You lied to emergency services. You tried to have me arrested for asking about our budget. I was scared, she said weakly. The same excuse she'd tried with the officers. The cameras prove you weren't scared. They prove you planned this whole thing. She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not remorse, not shame, but calculation. She was already working on her next angle. Those cameras are illegal. You can't record someone without their consent. This is our shared home, and you're not my tenant. I can install security cameras in my own house. I could have you arrested for invasion of privacy. Even after being caught red-handed, she was still looking for ways to turn this around, still searching for her next threat. Go ahead, I said. Call the police again. Tell them you want to file another report. See how that works out for you. The citation was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the consequences started piling up like dominoes falling. First came the court summons. She had to appear before a judge to answer for the false reporting charge. The fine was $1,500, but that was just the start. Then the neighbors started talking. When 4 police cars show up at your house on a Wednesday night, people notice. Word spread quickly that she'd been cited for making false reports. The social embarrassment was eating her alive. Mrs. Johnson asked me if everything was okay at home, she told me one afternoon, her voice tight with humiliation. What did you tell her? I said it was a misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding when you told 911 I was threatening you? You don't understand the position this puts me in. I understand perfectly. Actions have consequences. The worst part for her was that the citation created a permanent record. Background checks for jobs, rental applications, professional licenses, they would all show that she'd been convicted of filing false police reports. This is going to follow me forever, she said, staring at the court paperwork. It should. You tried to have your own husband arrested with lies. I didn't think they'd actually cite me. What did you think would happen? You thought you could lie to police and they'd just ignore it? She'd spent months building up this fantasy where she could weaponize law enforcement against me without any consequences for herself. Reality was hitting hard. The court appearance was a disaster for her. The judge reviewed the video evidence I provided, listened to the 911 call recording, and made it clear that false reports weren't taken lightly. Mrs. Last Name, the judge said. This video evidence shows a deliberate pattern of threatening false reports, culminating in an actual false report to emergency services. Your Honor. I was just scared, she tried. The evidence shows calculated deception, not fear. You wasted police resources that could have been helping real victims. The judge imposed the full fine, court costs, and added community service hours at a domestic violence shelter, where she'd have to explain to real abuse victims why she'd lied about being threatened. But the real end came 2 weeks later when I found her on the phone with her sister spinning the story one more time. He set me up, she was saying. He installed those cameras to trap me. He's been planning this whole thing. Even after everything, she still couldn't accept responsibility, still couldn't admit that her own actions had created this mess. That night, I sat her down for our final conversation as husband and wife. I'm filing for divorce, I said simply. Over one mistake? One mistake? You spent months threatening to lie to police. You actually did lie to police. You tried to have me arrested for discussing our budget. But we can work through this. Work through what? You crossing every line possible to avoid accountability for spending money we don't have. I'll change. I won't threaten to call them anymore. You think the problem is the threats. The problem is that you're someone who thinks lying to police is an acceptable way to win arguments. Everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone tries to destroy their spouse's life over a credit card statement. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you dialed 911. You can't just throw away our marriage over this. I'm not throwing it away. You threw it away the moment you decided police threats were an appropriate response to financial discussions. But I love you. You love controlling me. There's a difference. The divorce papers were filed the next Monday. She tried to contest it, claiming emotional distress and financial abuse, but her credibility was shot. The same video evidence that had exposed her false police report also proved that every financial conversation had been calm and reasonable. Her lawyer advised her to accept my settlement offer rather than risk having the videos played in divorce court, where they'd become public record. The house sold quickly. I kept most of our assets since she'd been the one spending money we didn't have. Her share went mostly to paying legal fees and the court fines from her false reporting conviction. The last time I saw her was at the final divorce hearing. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices had finally settled on her shoulders. I never meant for it to go this far, she said as we left the courthouse. Yes, you did. You planned every step of it. You just never planned on getting caught. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she was having trouble finding work. The conviction for false reporting showed up on background checks and employers weren't interested in hiring someone who'd lied to police. She'd thought threatening to call police would give her power over me. Instead, it gave me the clarity to see exactly who I'd married and the strength to walk away from someone who'd use law enforcement as a weapon in domestic arguments. The cameras that saved me from her lies also saved me from wasting any more years with someone who thought destroying her husband was preferable to having an honest conversation about money. She wanted to control me through fear and false accusations. The police taught her about consequences instead. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.